Welcome to my home.
Welcome to Whispers
of Vale Keep.
Hello everyone, I am Lady Zelda Kelly and welcome back to Whispers of Vale Keep. This is episode 4. Tonight's discussion is not folklore, it's not myth, and it's certainly not speculation. It is history. Uncomfortable history, and it deserves to be spoken carefully of. But before we begin, I would like to have a brief disclaimer. What you are about to hear is based on documented historical material paired with interpretation and opinion that some may find controversial. Listener discretion is advised. Lord Greggor, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to see you again and to have you back with us. I trust you are well and rested.
Hello, Valiana, and to all listening. Thank you, but rest is relative. Memory does not sleep. But yes, I am prepared.
That's very good to hear, because today we are not speaking about superstition. We are speaking about demonology, as it was understood, written, and enforced by a king. In 1597, King James of Scotland, later King James of England, published Demonology. Now, I want to take a moment and I want to spell this out for you, because this is a spelling that we now in modern times are not used to. It is spelled normally Demonology, but this is spelled Daemonologie. Very different, isn't it? So this was not rumor, this was not hearsay, this was a ruler placing fear into print.
Fear is most dangerous when it learns to write. In this situation, fear was shouting on paper.
Exactly. And what we want to examine today is not whether demons exist, but why King James believed they did. What shaped that belief and how that belief changed the course of history. This episode will stay focused and we will touch briefly on Europe, but we will not descend into a catalog of witch hunts. This is about one man, one book, and one moment when fear gained authority.
Before the book was written, Lady Zelda, fear was scattered. After the book was written, it had structure.
And that structure matters, because just 14 years later, in 1611, the same king, King James, would authorize a Bible that shaped the English-speaking world. 2 books, very different purposes, born from the same mind.
One book named the enemy, the other book named the law.
So tonight, Lord Greggor, let us begin at the beginning with no demons, but with a child who grew up surrounded by betrayal, loss, and silence. To understand why King James became so focused on demonology, we have to step back, not into folklore, but into his early life. James was born into instability. From infancy, he was surrounded by sudden loss, betrayal, and the removal of those meant to protect him. Parental presence was replaced by political maneuvering, religious conflict, and silence.
A child raised without safety or parents learns to look for danger everywhere. Valiana.
Exactly. And while this type of upbringing was not unusual among royalty, it was not harmless. James learned early that threats did not always announce themselves. They moved quietly, and they worked behind the scenes. So when James later faced chaos, storms, unrest, unexplained events, his mind reached for an explanation that matched what he had always known: an unseen force working against order. By the late 1500s, that fear had found a framework. In 1597, James authored Demonology, not a story, not a speculation, but as instruction. If you look at the screen now, I'll be showing you images from the original Demonology text. Please take note of the title page. You'll see the phrase, printed for high and mighty prince. That language matters. Have you ever heard of someone described as high and mighty? This is where the expression came from. In that era, words were used to elevate authority. Titles were not just honorific. They were declarations of power, hierarchy, and unquestioned rule.
Language and titles teaches people where they belong in some cases.
And Demonology was written from that elevated position. It told judges, clergy, officials how to think about unseen threats. It framed fear as something that could be identified, named, and controlled. For James, this wasn't abstract. It was personal. It gave structure to anxieties that had followed him since childhood. And that is the danger. Because this book didn't remain theory. It shaped how people interpreted events. It shaped how suspicion spread, and it taught communities to look inward, at neighbors, servants, and the ordinary as possible sources of unseen harm. This is why Demonology matters, not because of what it says about demons, but because of what it reveals about authority, belief, and the human need to make fear manageable. And it's from this same mind, just later, that 1611 English Bible would be authorized. Two very different books, born from the same desire for order.
Lady Zelda. When demonology takes root in a ruler's mind, it does not stay confined to fear. It begins to shape how truth itself is understood. King James did not separate the unseen world from scripture. To him, they were intertwined. Order on earth depended on order in heaven. Scripture, then, was not only a source of faith, it was a framework for containment.
Meaning the text itself became a way to stabilize what felt unstable.
Precisely. James believed the unseen operated through hierarchy. Angels above, humanity beneath, disorder punished. Anything that disrupted that structure was a threat. Demonology taught him that chaos hides behind familiar faces. Scripture therefore had to be precise, unified, and beyond challenge.
If you look at the screen right now, I'll be showing you an interior page from Demonology, from the 1597 book version. Notice the tone: instructional, confident, absolute, and absolutely frightening.
That same tone carried forward. When James later authorized a new English Bible, his rules were clear. The language must be dignified, the hierarchy preserved, interpretation restrained. This was not about curiosity. It was about control through clarity.
And this helps explain why he opposed earlier English Bibles that included commentary in the margins.
Yes, those notes encouraged questioning. James had seen what questioning could do. In courts, in churches, in families. To a mind shaped by fear of hidden disruption, commentary is instability.
So then Scripture had to become something that could stand alone.
Exactly. One voice, one authorized meaning. one structure that could not be bent by personal interpretation. In Demonology, ambiguity invites danger. In scripture, James believed ambiguity invited rebellion.
And yet, this is important. The translators themselves quietly resisted absolute certainty. The translators that I'm talking about are those that King James authorized to translate scripture into the English Bible that we know.
They did. They acknowledged human limitation. They allowed room for humility. But the king's intention was clear. Scripture was to steady the world he believed was constantly on the verge of unseen collapse.
So when we place Demonology, the book, beside the 1611 Bible, we're not seeing contradiction, are we?
We're seeing continuity. One book attempted to define the threat. The other attempted to define the law.
And both were shaped by the same fear. That disorder, once allowed, spreads like fire.
Fear does not always shout. Sometimes it organizes. What followed Demonology did not remain within one border. Ideas rarely do. Across Europe, fear was already present. But it lacked uniform shape. Local customs differed. Accusations varied. Responses were inconsistent. What King James provided was not origin, but permission.
While permission carries weight when it comes from a crown.
It does. Veliana. When authority names an unseen threat, others listen, especially those already uneasy. Courts on the continent did not need James's book to fear the unseen, but they welcomed language that made fear orderly. You began to see the same patterns repeated. Interrogation framed as protection, suspicion framed as duty, certainty framed as virtue.
And that's where Europe becomes heavier.
Yes, but we will not linger there. Because what matters for our discussion is this. James's work did not create widespread harm on its own. It validated a mindset already searching for structure. Once fear gains a shared vocabulary, it spreads efficiently.
And that vocabulary crossed borders.
Quietly, through clergy, through courts, through those who believed they were preserving order. This is why Europe's experience grew broader, longer, and more severe. Not because it was more fearful, but because it was more organized.
And that's where we stop today.
Exactly. This episode is not about scale, it is about origin.
Which brings us back to you, Lord Greggor, because you were there to witness this shift. So let me ask you something directly. When Demonology appeared, did it feel new? Or did it feel like fear finally learned how to speak?
Lady Zelda, it felt familiar, but louder. I would agree, with precision. Control was not exercised despite fear, it was exercised through it. When authority convinces the masses that danger is everywhere but safety flows only from obedience, fear becomes manageable, not for the people, but for those in power. This is not chaos, it is cold order. Fear, when left unshaped, scatters. Fear, when shaped by language, law, and belief, becomes a tool. The danger is not that people were afraid. The danger is that they were taught where to place that fear. And once fear is directed, it no longer needs force. It governs itself. That is why it feels colder. Emotion has been removed, only structure remains.
Lord Greggor, being a mother, I can look at this and distinguish that James was a child, basically afraid of the dark, and in order to cope, he put his type of control in his penmanship of Demonology. What do you think about that?
Lady Zelda, from what I observe, you are a very good mother. Your observation is a compassionate one of James, and it is not misplaced. When a child grows up without reassurance, without the quiet certainty that someone stronger stands a watch, the dark becomes more than absence of light. It becomes possibility. A frightened child imagines danger everywhere. An adult with authority seeks to define it. James did not merely fear the unseen, he feared not understanding it. And for a mind shaped by loss and uncertainty, naming the dark feels like mastering it. Writing Demonology allowed him to do what he could never do as a child, to give fear boundaries, labels, rules, and consequences. This was not comfort, it was containment. And you are right. There is something tragically human in that. A child once unsettled by shadows grows into a ruler who insists the shadows be catalogued, explained, and controlled. Fear, once internal, was externalized, and once externalized, it could be governed. That does not excuse what followed, but it does help us understand why it felt necessary to him. Sometimes the most rigid systems are built by those who once needed reassurance the most.
Lord Greggor, I have seen your vast library at Vale Keep. It is massive and impressive, and I want to ask you, do you have copies of this book, Demonology, that was printed in 1597, and also of the original King James Version from 1611 in your library?
Yes, both are present at Vale Keep, though neither is treated as a book meant for comfort. The volume printed in 1597, Demonology, rests apart from the rest, not hidden, but not displayed. It is kept as a record of a moment when fear learned to present itself as reason. The 1611 authorized version is there as well. An early printing, worn at the edges, complete with what later hands chose to remove. It is consulted, not revered. They are not shelved together. One represents fear given language, the other represents order given voice. Placed side by side, they explain each other too well. At Vale Keep, books are not collected for what they claim to say, but for what they reveal about the hands that wrote them, and the minds that believed them necessary.
Do you feel, since they are not kept together at Vale Keep, that there is a certain energy vibration that would definitely conflict if they were in close proximity?
Lady Zelda, I would not call it an energy in the theatrical sense. No sparks, no disturbances. But there is a resonance. Books carry intention, not magic, purpose. When two texts are born from the same fear but resolve it differently, placing them in close proximity creates a kind of tension. Not dangerous, but clarifying. Demonology presses inward. It narrows the world, teaches suspicion, defines threat. The 1611 Bible presses outward. It seeks order, continuity, and authority through shared language. When kept too close, one sharpens the other. Fear becomes more rigid. Order becomes more brittle. At Vale Keep, we avoid unnecessary reinforcement. Distance allows each to be read for what it is, not as an argument, but as evidence. So no, I would not say they conflict. I would say they echo. And echoes, when repeated too often, begin to sound like truth.
Well, thank you for that explanation. It certainly gives us a definite visual. But now, before we go on, I want to say that my preferred text is the King James Version of the Bible. And personally, it is my opinion, because of circumstances and situations possibly similar to that of King James, there may be other Bibles out there that not only include misinterpretations based on fear of the original word in the scripture, but may omit scripture or verses, period. Personally, I fear, well, not fear, but I feel it is the closest to the given manuscripts that we can have. But always, there's a caution that goes along with what publisher you propose or you purchase these books from. I feel they are sacred because it is a representation of what was given us as guidance and direction, not authority of fear. So with that, Lord Greggor, I'm going to ask you to please continue.
Your distinction is an important one, and a careful one. To hold a text as sacred does not require believing it is untouched by human hands. It requires understanding why those hands moved as they did. The King James Version endures, not because it is flawless, but because it was forged with reverence for language, structure, and continuity. It sought fidelity to the manuscripts available, not innovation driven by convenience or anxiety. You are also correct that fear can influence translation, not always by what is written, but by what is softened, rephrased, or quietly set aside. Omission is often more telling than alteration. This is why the source matters. The publisher matters. The intention matters. A sacred text should offer guidance and orientation, not coercion. When scripture is shaped to control behavior rather than illuminate conscience, it loses its center. At Vale Keep, the King James Version is regarded as a witness to faith expressed through disciplined language, not as an instrument of fear, but as a map offered to all, regardless of station. And you are right to hold caution alongside reverence. Sacred things deserve discernment, not blind certainty. That balance, respect without surrender of thought, is how texts remain alive rather than weaponized.
Well, thank you very much for that, Lord Greggor, and I appreciate your input. But now I want to ask you, since you were born in 1528 and the book of Demonology was penned and authored in 1597, and of course the King James Version of the Bible, 1611, you were definitely around. And was Vale Keep involved with any type of conflict or upheaval? Can you describe the time period and the role of Vale Keep, and even of yourself?
I was present, but Vale Keep was not a participant in upheaval. It was a threshold, not a battlefield. That period was unsettled everywhere. Belief hardened, authority narrowed, suspicion became a civic virtue. But Vale Keep did not align itself with movements of accusation or enforcement. We did not host proceedings. We did not lend names, lists, or testimony. We observed. Our role was to record transitions, not to accelerate them. I remember the years around 1597 as a shift in tone rather than event. Voices grew quieter in public and sharper in private. People spoke less of uncertainty and more of certainty borrowed from others. That is when danger deepens. As for myself, I learned restraint. When fear began to organize, the safest position was stillness. Intervention would have drawn attention. Attention would have invited interpretation. Interpretation in that era rarely ended well. Vale Keep became a place of passage, not refuge. Messages moved through. Texts arrived and departed. Scholars passed briefly, spoke carefully, and left lighter than they came. We did not shelter conflict. We absorbed memory. By 1611, when the authorized version of the King James Bible appeared, the air felt heavier. Not with violence, but with finality. Language had settled into place. Debate narrowed. Order had been declared. Vale Keep remained unchanged outwardly, which was intentional. Survival then depended on appearing unremarkable. So if you ask whether we were involved, no. But if you ask whether we understood what was happening as it unfolded, yes. And that understanding is why the library exists as it does now, not to glorify the past, but to prevent its certainties from being mistaken for wisdom again.
Now we come to the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts in the United States. It didn't happen for about 80 years after the conflicts there in Europe. It was localized in that part of the particular country and the area of Salem. Can you connect that even with the span of years? Does Salem and the witch trials connect to that, what was going on in Europe some 80 years earlier?
Yes, they are connected, not by time, but by inheritance. Salem did not arise in isolation. It was the echo of Europe, carried across the sea and delayed by distance. The people who settled New England did not leave Europe empty-handed. They carried with them theology, fear, legal habits, and interpretive frameworks shaped decades earlier. Ideas travel more slowly than ships, but they travel faithfully. What Europe experienced in the late 1500s and early 1600s was a period where fear was given structure. How to suspect, how to question, how to decide who was dangerous. By the time Salem occurred, those ideas had already been refined. They no longer needed kings or treatises. They lived inside sermons, court customs, and community expectations. Salem was smaller, shorter, more localized.
I must say, Lord Greggor, I am so glad that we have you to shape this history and the historical events in our topics and our podcasts. The truth, integrity, character that comes out cannot be matched, and I appreciate it. And I know others here appreciate it very much that are listening.
Lady Zelda, your words are received with respect and gratitude. Truth is rarely loud. It does not demand allegiance. It asks only to be handled carefully. What we are doing here matters because it does not seek spectacle. It seeks understanding. And understanding is what prevents history from hardening into myth. If my presence serves, it is only because you ask the questions with integrity and restraint. A record is only as honest as the one willing to listen to it, without forcing conclusions. Those who are listening will take from this what they are ready to carry. That is how knowledge should move, quietly, responsibly, without coercion. I am glad to stand with you in this work, and I will continue to do so as long as the purpose remains clarity rather than certainty. When you are ready to close this chapter or open the next, I will be here.
Now, Lord Greggor, I know you know what I'm going to ask next. And I don't want you to feel that I'm putting you on the spot. But will you read us a couple of verses in the original language of the 1611 Bible? Just give us a little verse, and it is of your discretion.
I can do that, and I will keep it measured and brief, exactly as you've asked. I will read from the 1611 authorized version, using its original English wording, and I will name the chapter and verse so your listeners may follow along if they wish. Please give me one moment while I retrieve this book.
Of course, Lord Greggor, please take your time.
I am here now, Veliana. And now from Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God.
Thank you so much, Lord Greggor, for indulging my request. I really appreciate it more than you know. And for all of you that are listening, I want you to know we're not saying that demonology doesn't exist or that demons are not among us, because I believe they are. What we're saying is sometimes the most hurtful demons of demonology can be those of the mind. And with that being said, I'd like to thank you again, Lord Greggor of Vale Keep. I bid you adieu for now, and I would like to thank our listeners for being here once again, and to invite you to come next week, which is Christmas Day. We will be here at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's 7 p.m. New York time, and we will be talking about Christmastide. And I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. We've got some really wonderful things to discuss, and I think you'll definitely enjoy that. And I invite you to be here and listen later. But for now, I want to thank you for being here at Vale Keep once again. Be well, be safe. Remember always, walk on this side of the veil.
Until then, Lady Zelda, and to all who have listened. Christmastide is a season of thresholds, of quiet light held against long night. It is fitting that we meet there next. May the days ahead be gentle, the nights reflective, and the space between remembrance and hope remain open. Vale Keep stands. Farewell, and walk wisely, always on this side of the veil. Good night, Lady Zelda. Ich habe dich vermisst, Liliana.
Good night, Lord Greggor. Ich dich auch.